Welcome everybody to this new feature on WoBistDude, the blog, international multimedia blog dedicated to our kind of dispersed generation, different things that we're up to in different countries across the world. I am Bobby Weisblatt. I'm a WoBistDude contributor based in Dublin, Ireland, an expat who grew up in New Jersey originally. Talking today with my friend Trevor May, who is a filmmaker and cinematographer based out of Atlanta, Georgia. Thanks so much for joining us today, Trev.
What up, y'all?
Today, Trev and I are going to have a chat about quite a few different things. Trevor has worked, behind the camera for several years now within the Atlanta scene, as well as across the country. Moving across things like documentary to feature to music videos, all different types of video projects that I'm keen to hear about. He's kind of hot off of a documentary feature called On Island that was just released online a couple weeks ago. We're going to be chatting about that as well. But before we get into the details, I want to just kind of kick things off with some context for people that don't know you. So one of the things I'm curious to have people hear about from the start is a little bit more about kind of how you got into filmmaking in the first place, and specifically being that a lot of people early on, they get into film, they have it as an interest, maybe they decide to pick up filmmaking as well as a skill on top of that. But I think there's a turning point, especially around, the kind of the age we're at, where it becomes a decision that this is your career. And maybe that's a decision that comes earlier, maybe it comes later. But it's that point where you decide, like, this is what I want to do with my life. And not just that, this is what I'm going to do. And so I'm kind of curious about all that as well. So, fill me in. How did you get started with all of this?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. I wanted to do this for a long time, like, since I was in high school, and I was like, oh, I want to make movies, I want to do this, that, there. And it's such a strange industry. It's so opaque, I think, from the outside. If you don't have any connections into it, you don't really understand all the avenues and stuff that are open to you. So it can be very hard to like think about charting a path. You can be like, oh, I want to do this. There's no real like clear ladder to climb. It's pretty strange. And so when I was in college, the first job I had in media at all was actually shooting like the sports for like ESPN and the SEC network. They had a broadcast deal, I think, that they couldn't really afford, so they started paying college kids like nothing to shoot these games and stuff. So it was like the first time I did that. And I mean, I love sports, so I thought for a while, like, oh, like I'll I want to be like a camera operator for NBA games and stuff. And pretty quickly I was like, oh, I don't really like this environment as much. It's like kind of, it is still fun, and I like being at the games. It's like electric and stuff, but it's a little repetitive. So I was really floundering for a while, to be honest. I was about to go to law school and just like try and do like a more honest line of work, simpler path. But I got like an entry-level job, I don't know, at a very small production company in Athens, Georgia, and just had a lot of opportunities really quickly to, really get behind. Like, it's pretty hard to like get opportunities to like be behind the camera and be photographing whatever the work is, at the age of 22. And so I didn't know what I was doing at all. It's like teaching myself on the fly. And after a couple of years, I wanted to branch out a little more and grow in other directions. So I made the big leap. You got to go freelance. I moved back to Atlanta and kind of, I think, intentionally set my directions on trying to work in nonfiction, because Atlanta, there's a lot of people in Atlanta. A lot of people moved here around the same time I did too. A lot of, really talented cinematographers. and the commercial space and the music video spaces, it's very crowded. And there are people in it that are better at that than I am. You know, and but I've always had a strong connection with documentary filmmaking. It's probably my favorite space to work in. And I just kind of, you know, tried to set sails in that world, and I think it's slowly, you know, starting to kind of make a name for myself, you know, around here, that, you know, it's what I do. And yeah, calls are coming in a little more easily and stuff. And so it's, and doing a feature helps immensely. So yeah, that's about it. It's a weird, I guess, like that kind of just like really went tangential. And to go kind of back to what you were saying, just like, how do you get into it? It's a totally different market than it was 10 years ago. Like, it's, you know, I think a lot of people view the ease of access to digital equipment as kind of like, can be kind of curmudgeonly about it. It's like, wow, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't come up the right way, yada, yada, yada. But I think it's really cool. I think it like gives a lot of like young people, a lot of people from different backgrounds, you know, that didn't previously have access to, you know, this world, an opportunity to get their hands on cameras and just start like making images. I think that there's like I don't know, there's like a very much like kind of a gatekeeper mentality at times with like, well, this isn't this isn't that. And I don't know, I think media is always evolving, film's always evolving. And like, yeah, I mean, I want to see people just out there making stuff. If you care about what you're doing, you know, get out there and do it, you know. So I had a pretty unorthodox path. I didn't really go to film school, you know. I kind of had to just start building stuff on the fly, you know, and finding what my strengths were, what people liked about my work, what type of work I was doing best at, and then just, yeah, managing my business in that direction. So
Yeah,
so
cool.
weird,
Thanks for that.
weird.
No, it's I think it answers it thoroughly, and I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, right? Like you said, things have changed a lot in the past 10 years, but even beyond that, like, I think you're onto something with like the fact that the world still probably hasn't come to terms with the fact that like nearly every person has a camera in their
Definitely.
pocket
Yeah.
at all times, all
Right.
day long, especially when it comes to documentary as opposed to or nonfiction as opposed to feature. Like anyone ostensibly could shoot a documentary film at any point
Right.
on any
Right.
given day.
Right.
Which is such a phase change from, you know, the 100 years that came before that.
Yeah. And it's even, I mean, it's like, you know, things, for better or worse, you know, are oftentimes becoming like shorter and shorter, you know. So it's like even stuff is like silly as like TikTok. I don't know. I mean, like some of that stuff is just like a micro doc. It's like 60 seconds of like this thing, right? You know, and it's not necessarily the world that I want to operate in, but I don't, it's, I'm happy that there's like avenues for other people to like do what makes them happy and like, you know, make that stuff and get out there with a phone, do what makes you happy, you know. I want to see the world from other people's eyes, or just know that other people are engaging with it in a curious way, you know.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I think that if hopefully others share that perspective and, you know, continue to keep it open, especially for as more younger generations who grew up in a world where the world where anyone can shoot something on any day is the only world they know. It's important to have that level of openness and complete lack of pretension around it, you know. That could it could discourage the next big person from deciding to shoot something in the format that
Yeah.
they see. So yeah, that's really cool. It's interesting. I'd like to go a little deeper and kind of call out the project that just premiered that you worked on. I know a ton this past year. So the feature documentary is called On Island. It just premiered online a few weeks ago. I actually just tested this morning for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. if you open YouTube and you search the words On Island, it is the top hit. I tested it in an incognito window, so it doesn't matter if what your cookies or your cache are. If you search the words On Island, it will be the top hit on YouTube. And it's gotta throw compliments, of course. It's an absolutely brilliant short documentary feature about the community on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, specifically, having to do with drug and alcohol and substance abuse and programs in that community. But I think something that really wowed me about On Island is that it's about that, but it's also not really about that. I think, to me, in watching it, what really shined through for me is the place and the community and the people that you guys talk to. So much so that the rest of it kind of fades away. What you walk away remembering is this sense of place, this sense of the people in it, and this sense of the community that they have with each other. And I imagine that's not something that just happens when you go to a place and film people. And so I'm curious, as the person who was behind the camera, any insights into, was that something you guys were going for? And if so, how do you get that feeling to come across?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the compliments on that, because that is me and the director. We've talked at length sort of about, what do we want to elicit out of nonfiction storytelling? Because there's a lot of docs now, and it's especially over the last like 6 or 7 years, like branded documentaries have become a thing. And so there's a lot of approaches to, and it's not necessarily like a bad thing or whatever. I'm not saying that, but there is like an approach towards certain docs now that like can still like kind of try and polish things a little bit and add narrative sort of techniques and image crafting and image creation that isn't as observational. And we really wanted to go in with an approach that that kind of the opposite, that we just wanted to like be there, share space with people, create a space that is like comfortable and safe, and encourage vulnerability, and just trust that like if we can do those things, that beautiful imagery will come out of it. I think for me, one thing that I learned, especially through making that, is that all all of the apparatus of filmmaking, all the lights, the cameras, the crew, grip, hardware, everything, it's like all those things get in the way of making the documentary. It's like if I could just talk to someone with no camera and then like just pull it out of my head, like all those, that's the trick, is it's everything. You're trying to capture reality, you're trying to capture the world, but you're injecting inherently all of these like artificial foreign elements into a space, right? So that's the battle. People are not used to having a 35-pound camera in their living room, right? But you have to try and make an environment where they forget that it's there. So we really prioritized minimal crew. We had 4 people, the whole thing, which is real small, even for docs. Like it was like really hard work. Everybody's carrying heavy gear all the time, in and out of a van, driving around this, it's a small island, but it's still like 20 miles long. There's a lot of moving, and yeah, just minimal crew, minimal gear as best as possible. And just really like taking serious that like, we are not like, I'm not there to make necessarily like the images that like I care about, or this or that or whatever. Like I'm there to like witness, right? And I'm there to like, I want the camera to function as a window. I just want it to be like a direct eye for the viewer to see this space. It's I don't want to change what's happening in their space, because I think their space is beautiful. It's personal. personal. So that was like our approach to at least like interacting with subjects and stuff, is like always being, you know, conscientious and mindful of that they're people, you know, they're not actors, they're people. And that, you know, they have lives and we're there to capture them. You know, we're not there to like tailor their lives or their space to, you know, what we see fit. It's just, you know, we want to listen to people and talk and give, you know, a lot of people have never had the opportunity to be listened to like that. And that's special, you know, sitting in someone's home and, you know, asking how they feel. Like, really, like, how do you feel right now? Like, what has your life been like? Like, no one's talked to some people, especially, you know, a community like the substance use community. It's like, you know, they'll share often their experiences with like other people in recovery, but, you know, a lot of people outside of that community that have come in and made documentaries about it, and it's not bad, it's just typically has been focused on, you know, the real like the most intense parts of addiction, right? So it's a lot of, you know, it's sensational, like it's people, you know, shooting up heroin, you know, living, you know, in impoverished conditions because of their disease, like the way it's, but and all that stuff is valid and real and like should be captured, but we kind of had made this decision early on, and it was like we felt like that had been covered enough. So we really wanted to focus more on people that weren't necessarily in like intense active addiction, you know, people that were in recovery, you know, early recovery, especially, where it's like it's still, you know, you can tell. I mean, in that in our movie, there's, you know, some people that are still like fresh on their recovery journey, and it's like it's hard, you know, and those people don't really get covered a lot because it's not, you know, it's not explosive, it's not like easily like it's just a more patient approach, like it's more just like conversational, you know, emotive, asking how someone's feeling and stuff, because that's what's hard about recovery is it's, you know, you go from, you know, the complete insanity of living in active addiction to trying to just like figure out how to live life healthily, you know. So all that
Yeah.
to say, yeah, I don't know, it was very long-winded. I hope, yeah, that was
No, it was perfect. It was perfect, and it shines through for sure because you don't. I mean, it's funny. It's not until you mentioned it just now that I really did realize that like every single shot that you guys put together is like of, you know, the subjects at their job or home playing video games or, you know, cuddling with their significant other on the couch or, you know, fishing in the sea. Like everyone is just living and they're
Mhm.
talking about this thing that is a part of their life. But you're right, it's been covered before, and in a lot of ways it comes off as so human. It kind of comes off as the antithesis of, you know, those like cliched, if you saw like a 1960s, you know, black and white doc that was like, this
Right.
is Johnny and he's about to
Right.
smoke his first reefer cigarette. It's like the complete opposite of that, basically. As
Mhm.
far from that as you can go. And at no point does anybody feel, does anybody in the picture come across as a test subject or anything like that? It's people. Um,
Yeah. And there's if I just, you know, give credit to like people before me that have been like a big influence on my approach and my style, my ethos, um, like really like intention behind what you're doing and how you're approaching it. Like, I don't know, I could like even get on like the psychology of like how you move through a space when you're holding a camera. Like, are you respecting people's space? Like, there's physical space. It's a weird sort of experience. But there's a filmmaker that me and the director, who also shout out to director of On Island, Trevor Kane, who is a very dear friend and has given me an incredible amount of opportunities, and really helped me grow as an artist. It's been very nice. We've really grown together the past few years. But there's another documentary filmmaker that we both like hold in like extreme reverence. His name's Sean Dunn. He's done a bunch of short docs. He's done American Juggalo. He's done features like Florida Man. He's worked on the opioid crisis as well, the feature called Oxyana. He's just really like very interested in, you know, finding unique subcultures, unique places, you know, turning over rocks, looking for moss that people haven't covered. And his approach is like, just, he will like, you know, I've talked to him, and it's just always about, yeah, just sharing space with people and talking to people, and not like trying to make something look a certain way, you know. First and foremost, like it's you know, we're there for the subject, you know. We're there for the subject, right? We want them to be, you know, this is their moment to shine. This isn't my moment to be like, well, I want this to look, you know, like this interview look that I saw in this other documentary or whatever. Like, I don't care about that, you know. I want them to feel safe and feel respected, because that's the only way that you're gonna get any sort of honesty out of somebody that's like not camera trained. And I think like even in like I think even if you notice in our documentary, there's not a consistent interview look, which can be, you know, on most shows or most features would kind of be like a no. There's normally like you know, like, well, you know, we frame here, we do this is the type of lighting we want to, like, there's trying to like, you know, have this sense of consistency, you know. But we kind of didn't really want to take that approach. We were always like very more concerned with like trying to find a spot or a space that made them feel, you know, we would just be like, well, where do you want, like, where would you normally sit?
Yeah.
And then sit down, and then I would just be like, you know, because like some stuff's center framed, some stuff's short-sighted, some stuff's like more naturally like, you know, framed and or whatever. And it was really just about, yeah, like tailoring to their needs, you know, and who they are.
Yeah. So. And I mean, it also, you balance a lot of those interviews out with this also like really beautiful, really, you know, picturesque landscape footage of around Martha's Vineyard at different times of day, different seasons, et cetera. And so, you know, as the person behind the camera, I wonder, like, is that kind of a trade-off for you where, you know, for the interviews, it's like, this is not about me. This is about the space. This is about the people I'm talking to. But then when you get to go out and you get to kind of shoot the nature around you, that's where you can really kind of let your eye go and you can really indulge in what you want to shoot a bit more.
Yeah, to an extent, but then at the same time, you know, you're at the mercy of the land, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and I mean, we're just, you know, totally lucky that, like, I mean, Martha's Vineyard is like a just insanely beautiful place. It is very rich and diverse in its terrain. And it, like, I don't know, it has like it's sacred space, man. Like it's a really special place. There's like a ton of history there, a ton of like lives that have been lived there. It is like there's like a palpable electricity of just how close knit and, you know, identifiable people, their connection to the land and to being an islander and to being, you know, it's like, because it's so, you know, it's so small, you know. And it's, you know, part of, you know, what we wanted to capture, which we weren't really like totally able to because of COVID, was, you know, kind of tracking how people's behavior changes from the off season to the busy season. And, you know, like we went back in the summer and stuff, and it, like, I mean, it was busy, but like nothing compared to what it would normally be like, you know. Because I mean, there's like 20,000 people that like really live there, and then like over the summer there's like 100,000 people that come Like
Yeah.
it's totally insane.
Yeah. Yeah, completely different this year, of course, and I'm curious to hear more about that as well, because as you guys mentioned in the documentary, you went in, I think, in February for the first shoot. Is that right? So kind of just before things really took off with COVID, and then
Yeah.
went again. And I guess the intention all along was to go again in the summer, but obviously you thought you'd get a very different summer, I imagine, right?
Well, yeah. Well, there was like, yeah. I mean, we were there in February, and it was just like, we're like COVID. We're like making jokes about COVID and stuff.
Yeah.
So so weird to think about that. Um, you know, and it was cold as fuck too. I don't know if you've ever been like, I am not from. I'm from Atlanta. I've been in the South my whole life, and I mean, there are some just like cold fucking what. Like you're surrounded by ocean and breathe. Like there's I don't know, like a couple mornings, like me and Trevor, uh, getting up at like 4 a.m., like hiking like a mile and a half up this like remote shore, and it's so fucking cold. It was like 0 degree, like crazy. So yeah, that was wild. Just experiencing that sort of conditions. But yeah, we were supposed to, yeah, again, like all along, the original idea was to sort of, have a better insight into like and more exposure into how this like seasonal economy affects people with substance use disorder, because and Martha's Vineyard's like very unique in that it's like, okay, well, you make all your money in 4 months, right? And all these people, most of them work in the service industry, and the service industry during those months that you're making your money, it's like a fucking party, right? It's like wealthy people coming in, just throwing a lot of money around, and everyone's drinking constantly, and so you kind of like party all summer, and then everyone disappears. It's very isolated. The sun sets at like 4:30. It's cold as fuck. Most of the places are closed. So then that's a hard living condition to live in. I mean, we have like some semblance of insight into that isolation now, with how we've had to experience lockdown. But it's like that every year for them, and so it does, that pattern has a very like tangible effect on their behavior, or can, but so we wanted to show more of like the hustle and bustle of the summer. And then obviously, like, yeah, like once I think we wrapped like February 25th or something, 26th, the first trip, sometime like, yeah, late February. And March 12th, was it a year ago?
Yep, to the day.
To the day. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it shut down, and then it was just like, I mean, I didn't know what the hell, like I didn't work for 4 months, and it was just, we didn't know if we were going to finish it, or like if it was just going to have to like stay as is, and just be kind of like, a 30-minute short, which is kind of a bummer. But I think that the people that finance the operation, they really wanted, they thought it was important to like, find a way for us to like continue telling the story regardless. And we fucking drove up there because we didn't, like couldn't get an airplane. And like, I mean, it's fucking 20, 21, 22-hour drive. And then, hour-long ferry. Like it is like, yeah, you just feel like way, way, way out of time and space getting there. It's wild. I mean, it was, yeah, I mean, it's anyone that's worked in film production during the fucking pandemic knows that it's a challenge. Like, it, limits what you can do, if you're, trying to really be safe and healthy and stuff. And it's, it makes that, that shared space, that like trust and honesty that you are striving to get out of your subjects even harder, because right now nobody trusts anybody in their space. Inherently it's like,
Yeah.
get away from me. Like, what are you doing? You can't, why aren't you, you have a mask on, you got this, it's like, can I take my mask off? Can I do that? um yeah, this total challenge. But I mean, luckily, because you know the summer wasn't as busy as it normally was, we kind of like shifted focus and was just like, okay, well, I mean, we have these people we've already followed, like, let's just focus on kind of like following up with them, and like, trying to find more intimate moments with them, and just make it like really like more of like a human interest piece. And I love that we like didn't go in with an agenda. We let um we were really like just kind of surrendered to the situation, um and just brought like a curious eye up there, and you know open minds and hearts, and really we just trusted that this, we'll figure out a way to like tell the story how it's meant to be told. And it came out as basically, like this kind of, you know it's kind of a funky length. It's like 65 minutes, which I think is really fun. Because I think more stuff should be in that ballpark, because I don't think some things need to be
100%. Oh
some
my
things
God.
need minutes, and like, I was so glad when, you know, because I think there was like an assembly cut that I'd seen, like a rough cut, it's like 95 minutes. And I was like, I
Yeah.
can't, like, I shot this and I can't fucking watch this. This is like, yeah. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
It gets
that
the
wasn't,
job done.
yeah. And
I mean, it gets
that
the
wasn't,
message across.
that wasn't my call to be like, cut this. But when they did, they were like, oh, we're going to like cut it down to like 60 minutes, 65 minutes. I was like, fuck yeah. And it's so much stronger.
Yeah.
And people, it sucks because people shy away from this length because there's, this festival pressure of like, it's got to be like 75, 80 minutes or whatever. And so, on the one hand, as a filmmaker, trying to like get your work out there, it kind of sucks a little bit that it's like, oh, we're kind of missing out on, maybe like having a better festival run because of the way that, contractually it had to premiere because it was like privately funded. And, people that funded it wanted to, have it out as quickly as possible. Like, they don't care about having a festival run. They're like, we need, the purpose of this film is to help like this community get help. So it's frustrating a little bit because it's like, oh, we're missing out on it. But at the same time, it's kind of cool too, because it's just like, I know a lot of people that like shoot films and it takes forever, because you have to time it right. And then, you may not get in on the first cycle, and then you go to, you go on, so it'll be like 2.5 years after you shot something. So it was, I mean, to me, great that, it's very rare that you shoot a feature and 12 months later, like, you can just share it with anybody, and I think that that's cool.
100%.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that it's silly that like it might get points taken off, like trying to get into festivals because it's on YouTube or it's
Yeah.
65 minutes. And like, I don't know, all that, like all these like norms and, unwritten rules and stuff like that. I just I don't know. I just want to make movies, And
Yeah.
if yeah, if the movie that we made is a weird length, but it's the best length for it, then, I'm here for it.
Yeah. So be it. And I mean, YouTube is a film festival. They runs
Yeah.
24 hours a day, every day. Like, and especially, if that's the case and it's a platform that's competing for everyone's attention and everyone is competing for every single minute, uh, in that space, I mean, I think that runtime does way more for you guys in terms of getting more eyes on the thing.
Mhm.
It's, it's a everybody does the thing where you recommend a film regardless of length to your friends, and they say, oh yeah, I'll check it out. But like, that someone might skim through it, or somebody might not watch
Right.
it at all, or whatever. And of course, there's always the ride or dies that are going to do it anyway. but I think that the length does have a lot to do with that. And like you were saying, if it's the right length for the film, and it conveniently also ends up being a length that is much easier to get more eyes on, to get through that attention barrier as well, then that's a huge win.
Right.
Even if it means, like you said, sacrificing some of these kind of more traditional festival guidelines.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I just think it works. It works really well for what we did, because it's like, you know, our approach and our style is, very meditative and patient, in making this. Like, it's a single camera documentary. Like, there's not a second angle to cut to. Like, I mean, we did what, basically everyone does now when you're shooting a single cam doc, and you kind of like, put away shots of eyes and hands and stuff, because I mean, you still have to cut up an interview. But our approach to the B-roll, our approach to interviewing people, we're not after sound bites. We're not after, you know, a quick cut thing. Like, we really, I want people to feel like, in their living room, they're taking the space in, because I was, overwhelmed by like the grace of that land. Like, it's a magical place, and people should feel, what the hell? People should feel like there's a magic in seeing someone's face on a screen too, you know? Like, don't take for granted, like, this is a human being, like, talking to you, like, respect that. Like, look, and I want them to like look someone in the eye on their TV, and it should feel like you're having a conversation with them. I don't want it to feel like it's, a product. I want it to feel as real as it can. So, you know, and so all that to say, I'm like, I'm always get so up my own ass about talking about stuff. All that to say, even though there is like a slower pace and quality to the style from, minute to minute, the sections that it goes in, I think, move along quite well. I would say, like, especially like, you know, once we really get going, like, I would say probably the 15-minute mark, and you really kind of are just like bouncing back and forth between these people's lives. I mean, I'm biased, but I think it's like pretty, I think it's pretty enriching. It's pretty, like, it keeps my attention. It's like the only thing I've ever done that I like watch, I'll come back to. I get stuff out of it. I get stuff out of watching it, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can second that as well. That, I think that you guys really did accomplish what you set out to achieve. I hope, people continue watching it more and more. Obviously, hoping that plugging it here a bit will help, and that people watching this right now will go give it a look. And I'll come back to it a little bit more at the end. But for now, I wanted to change gears a little bit as well. Ask you about another documentary feature you and I have discussed, just moments before recording here, which I think in some ways you could kind of BS and say, like, yeah, there are similarities I could draw between this and On Island, and then in other ways you're like, this thing is Pluto and On Island is Earth. Like, it's like, video from another planet in a lot of ways. And the film I'm talking about is Theo Anthony's Rat film from 2016. His, I don't even know what you'd really call it, kind of experimental video essay documentary on Baltimore. And it's an interesting documentary to talk about, because after seeing it, after watching some interviews about it and stuff, there are like landmines everywhere. And if, certain people start to talk about this film in a certain kind of way, like, boom, you explode, and you have like gone down a very slippery slope in a wrong way. And then in seeing the director, Theo Anthony, talk about it, obviously there's some intention there as well. And I think it's part of what makes the film pretty brilliant. So I know you've seen it in the past. I just watched it for the first time about 2 days ago. It really,
Oh, cool. Yeah.
like, smacked me in the face and stuck with me. So, first of all, just general thoughts on this film, and kind of how this film goes about approaching that sense of place.
I mean, it's wild. I don't know. It like rat film like totally fucking floored me. Um, and that like kind of like, yeah, I guess what you're talking about, like navigating space and everything, like that's like one guy with like a camera this big, right? He's shot most of that on 5D. Um, and so like his footprint is zero. And like that's so magic, because it's like that's what I'm talking about. People forget that you're like making a movie. Like, and it really just like, I don't know, it doesn't feel or look like anything else I've ever seen. And it's so cool. I am like so here for people. Like I think documentary, and it's obviously it's changed rapidly over the last 10 years. Like it's in a total renaissance period, because I would say like before, most streaming services, which, for, pros and cons of this, the streaming sphere or whatever, with, people that are big theatrical fans, like it's given a lot of opportunity for, there's been a big demand for documentary content. Right. And so it's really kind of changed the fabric of what we thought of. Like previously, you'd be like, documentary, that's dry, that's boring, that's this, that's that. And it's just like, it's two things. I mean, it's just more people getting an opportunity to like be, have different visions and bringing stuff to the medium. And then the equipment, it really like, I mean, you couldn't make rat film shooting on the fucking 35mm camera, 16mm camera, like maybe like a little 8mm scoop, but like, it's just, I don't know, it's just a guy walking around with, camera this big and a lens and just talking to people. And, it's crazy. I don't know. And just the way that it's an alien film. Like it's totally like, it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like it's like, it just completely floored me. Um, he has a 30 for 30 short, which I don't know if you've
Really?
seen.
No,
It's
no, I didn't even know.
the weirdest sports documentary ever made, because it's just about like, do you watch tennis at all?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen some, sure.
Okay, so like they have the that like when there's like a ball that's like on the margin of the line, right? And they're not sure if it's in or out. Well, now they have
Yeah.
those like digital renderings. It's just about that technology. Like it's so like weird, and it's like it's a 40-minute doc too, which is cool that he's just like, I don't fucking care how long this thing is. And it's like the same like, tool of having this like this narrator that sounds foreign. It doesn't sound like it's being narrated. Like it seems so observational from a non-human perspective. Like he gets this, like he has this way of like making it seem like he is just a different species observing people. On Island, I think is very much like people observing people, right?
Yeah.
But rat film is just like, what if artificial life like came to this planet? Like, the way that guy's great, I want to talk to him so bad. Like you can, I don't know, like you can just tell someone's like a fucking genius by the, I'm like, how in the world can you like view something as like insidious and just omnipresent as like gentrification, and then just like seamlessly, like you can like these like dots that I don't think a lot of people would connect, right? Where he's like, well, this makes sense because this is how people treat everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not just about gentrification, it's about human behavior and like humans capacity to just disregard life and control things and construct things, and the disconnect that we can have from living things. It's wild. I don't know.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
wild watching that guy's brain trying to like, you're like, where the fuck is he, like what is this? And there's that moment at the end of rat film when he's talking about the the big rat experiment they constructed, where they basically constructed a rat metropolis and
Yeah.
behavioral sink. And then he like cuts back to all this footage of Baltimore and all this stuff, and you're just like, oh, like it's such a patient and really requires so much respect for the audience. I think that's one thing that I really love about that film, is that he's like, I am not going to hold your hand and constantly be like, well, this is like this, right? This is, I'm saying this because this, and this. He's just like, are you going to get it or not? And because this is how I'm thinking, you know, and if you walk away from it and, you know, get something similar out of it that I do, then great. But, you know, it's all the more
Completely.
rewarding, you know, it's
And it's so
very,
bold, like to be able to do something that could so easily be put into a box that it's not as well, you know, to have you, because you know that when that thing premiered, that one out of every, I don't know, 3 or 4 people walking out of seeing that for the first time are just like, I get it. Like he's comparing, you know, people in bad neighborhoods to rats. And is that okay? And it's like, did you even watch the same movie? Like,
yeah,
do you have any idea what you just saw? But obviously, like, he's aware of that risk going in, that like that is something that people taking the path of least resistance might walk away with. And if you've seen any interviews with him talking about it, like he's very vocal about that as well, and about like, I wasn't going to make sacrifices, you know, to keep that from happening if it kept me from making this movie, essentially. And
yeah.
I mean, I just think that's incredibly gutsy as well.
He has a lot, and I mean, I saw Rat Film after, you know, we made our movie, um, and there's like, he has some, I mean, in terms of just like visual creativity, I'm like, this dude's on another level. Like, I don't know, I love like when people find new material to like play with, and like all the stuff with like the weird like PS1 rat renderings and like break
Unreal.
Google Earth. I was just like, dude, this guy is like this.
Unreal. And the renderings, like how the renderings of Baltimore start off really basic and then they get like more and more expansive and detailed as well. Like,
I'm like, dude, this guy, like, it must be exhausting being in this guy's head, because he's just like, like, you know, I mean, he just seems like someone that's like really prescient and like gets that it's not like, and this is a problem with like most issues, right? Like, you know, with gentrification, like it's not just gentrification. Like this is like there's all these other things, like, and it can be so debilitating to start kind of trying to like think back, like, why is this actually happening, right? Why is this actually happening? And he just has like an incredible way of just like seeing things very clearly, and just being like, this actually makes sense that this is happening, because this is just what people do, you know. It's, I don't know, he's totally wild. And he
yeah.
has like there's a few shots in Rat Film that like really like jumped out to me, um because I have like a similar sort of, I really like shooting um certain things like below like an 18mm lens, right? Because that's when you really kind of start like pushing the boundaries of naturalism. Um, Once you really like start getting like way wider than the human eye,
Mm.
it kind of like, you know, it can be like, you know, if it can, you have to be careful because it can draw attention to itself, because it can be like, you know, this is something that you normally couldn't see. It's an overwhelming amount of visual data for your brain to process, because your line of sight is much narrower. But I typically, you know, at least like the stuff I've done, again, it's like a human looking at humans, right? So it's like when I'm shooting like landscapes on Martha's Vineyard and stuff, it's like in reverence, you know. I'm like, this is like holy space, and I want this to feel honored. But there's some stuff in Rat Film, and it's literally just about like camera positioning, and it's like this really wide lens, but just like looking down on something in like a really just like impersonal way. Like there's a shot of
Yeah.
the, like a washing machine and a dryer, and it's just like totally center frame. It's just like, it's just sheer data, right? It's just
Yeah.
like, and it's so fucking, it's so interesting to me. And I'm like, I don't know if anybody else is like geeking out on like how, I'm like, God, it's just, because it's just ugly in a way, you know? It's ugly in a really beautiful way, where it's, you know, look, just looking at something and like in a creating a sense of disconnect, right? Creating a sense of, you know, the bias and everything that you bring towards looking at things in the way that you, as a human, you look at the world around you and take stuff for granted. And it's just simply like changing where the camera is, you know, it's very psychologically different and powerful.
Completely.
So
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he does with the internet with All Light Everywhere, because
well, it's
it,
not
it's
it's not
well,
even about the internet, right? Like it's about fucking police body cams.
that's the thing. I have no idea. Like the only like snippets I've been able to read are just like, yeah, it's about like the interconnectedness of different people, and but it's also about this, and so like everything I've read seems to be completely different. I think the things I've read about it being more about like data and internet have me a bit more interested, and I think it's mainly because um, I a few years back when I saw the Werner Herzog documentary, Lo and Behold, The Connected World, which he made about kind of the internet or whatever. And you know, there's a lot of Werner Herzog stuff that I really like. That wasn't one of my favorites because it felt like one of those things where like he took something that I'm so fascinated in seeing someone like him really get into, and it felt like he just kind of peeled back like one layer, and it left me personally like really empty after. I was like, there's so much more to do here. I think in a lot of ways Adam Curtis is someone who's like picked up that torch in a lot of ways that I love. um, but that's part of why like I think I have seen in the descriptions I've read of All Light Everywhere, I've been like focusing on the aspects that I want it to be most, and I'm like, dude, please make
But
like the
yeah,
great interconnectedness doc, like do
it's
rat film but for this.
yeah, I'm sure it is because I mean, there's like again, he's like an incredibly brilliant mind, and he's like
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's like he's not just making a movie about gentrification, or he's not just make like you have to watch the I can't remember the name of the 30 for 30 he did, but it's the weirdest sports documentary. Like it's like about like the you know the psychological effects of having like technology you know, overlaid over like the most human and it's tennis, which is like the most like one like it's such like an intimate battle, you know,
yeah,
outside of like boxing, it's like probably the most like intimate glimpse into an opponent that you have in sports. Um and so you know, like whatever the fuck he's like doing a documentary on, like it's gonna just be about like whoop, like it's
I
just
know.
so
I can't
cool.
wait. I can't wait. I'm hoping
Like,
it'll
watch
crawl its
it.
way onto the internet somehow, someday soon.
Gotta find
Um, it's
yeah.
one of those that I keep eyes on for sure. But yeah, before we kind of wrap up, I mean, we're coming close to time, but I want to you know, that flew by, and I want to talk a little bit more about maybe some stuff that you have coming up. Obviously, like there are some things, of course, that you can or can't talk about depending on stages of projects, but you know, of course, anything you want to plug, but also anything that you're kind of excited about, maybe any prospects in terms of things that you maybe can get back to now that things in the US might be opening up a little more, et cetera. So like what does the future hold for you kind of this year?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like future is always so weird when you're freelancing because it changes day to day. Um, so there's a couple of projects that I want to try and I want to try and direct um, as like a more you know a single entity sort of approach and kind of see what I can do in my quest to minimize my footprint as a filmmaker as much as possible. So there's a couple of documentaries about um, different musicians that I'm curious and I've kind of been talking to people about. And then there's also I shot a second feature last year. Well, really from like 2019 to 2020 with another good friend of mine um, that hopefully I think they're in the process of they're trying to like picture lock it. I think by end of April. And I'm actually quite excited about that because it's actually a comedic documentary, which I think there's not a lot of those. And it's a piece about the environment, which is like traditionally, very much confined to being like somber and about norms and this and that. But my friend Fraser Jones, so I'll shout out, follow him on Instagram. He's a fantastic follow. He's a quality entertainer. But he just kind of had this idea of like, all these environmental documentary pieces, which is like typically very much centered around like white men being like, I am taking on this, gargantuan environmental problem, and I will like talk about like I am saving this. I am like it's well intentioned, but like it's not always like the most. I have typically just someone who tries to like remove myself as much as possible from the world I'm showing, because I think it's more about them, not myself. And doesn't mean that all of like there have been plenty of docs that had this style that were good and impactful and powerful and shared stories and stuff. But there's also like cases, I think, of like stuff where it's like you really kind of didn't need to insert yourself so hard into this, and so his approach was basically that, well, what if we kind of just like made fun of that, and I created a character who's like just painfully unaware of how like self-absorbed and egotistical he is, and we just told people basically that like we're making this movie. It's like kind of like a Borat sort of approach.
Yeah.
I tell people like, it's like PG sort of Borat, because it's like it's still like we do want to like show and educate on some like environmental degradation issues and stuff. But we're hoping that by kind of connecting those beats and those like issues and dots with entertainment that we find funny, people like laughing, and it helps people remember information and stuff, and just trying a different approach. We lived in a van together for like a total of like 30 days, and it's fun. It's going to be very fun. It was like totally an incredible experience to basically pretend to be bad at what you're doing. Like all of the things that I'm like, championing for my approach to like interviews and stuff with On Island, which like we did the complete opposite. So we would like argue in front of people, like yell at each other, like just be trying to make people just be like, what are you guys doing? Like it's very funny. I farted a lot in front of people. That was part of my character. I don't know. That was like I don't know. It's like projects that it would be very special, because it's it was two dudes in a van and a camera, So
And
it was
that,
yeah.
I'm excited to see it. That brings us kind of back to the point at the start of like, that's all you need,
Yeah.
you have two guys and a camera and an idea of a vague idea even of what this is going to be, and you go out and you do it, and hopefully things come together and the stars align, and the barrier isn't, there's not much of one.
It's like totally, completely self-financed by Fraser, and he was just like, I don't think you can make a documentary cheaper than this. It's like barely paying me and paying for gas and food, like that's about it. But it's cool. Like again, you couldn't have made that 10 years ago, or it would have been so much more expensive, to shoot all that on 16, and then try and record sound, and it just would have been a total nightmare. But we had a lot, like we really like kind of had a lot of fun with it, and just kind of even like playing with technological failures and stuff. Like, we had like audio problems. We just like leaned into it, and like, like we had like a lav mic that wouldn't work, and so then he just started like holding it like a tiny little microphone, and he'd be like passing. It's just like, it's just stupid.
Oh man,
I don't know, like, and
I can't wait to see this.
yeah, it's gonna be fun. More funny docs. I say more funny docs.
More
There's
funny docs.
there's not enough laughter in the world.
All for it.
But yeah, so
Nice,
that's
man.
the thing I have coming up outside of just like little, when you're freelancing, it's just, can you do like odds and ends little jobs that kind of like hold you over until the next, big thing, so we'll see.
Nice
I'm
one.
excited. Yeah.
Nice one. Well, I'm gonna wrap us up because I want to keep us in that sweet spot that we were talking about with On Island, and hopefully get some people's eyes on this, and to check it out.
This week, make this like a 65-minute interview, and then next time you watch the movie, you can just mute it and then play this over it.
Exactly. It's just gonna be the audio commentary log. There we go.
Just
Brilliant.
completely just off the rails audio commentary, disconnected to everything you're saying. So
those are the best though, right? That's the best kind of commentary. If you ever listen to like any of the PTA commentaries, they're always just like, they're so fun. This is the scene where Mark Wahlberg does a bunch of cocaine. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, just like talking. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, man, thank you so much for joining. This was amazing. One last plug for On Island. Again, for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, just check it out, On Island. It's on YouTube. Just type in those words, you'll see it. On Island feature documentary, all about the community that Trevor May and Trevor Kane and the two others on their crew spent time with on Martha's Vineyard this year.
Shouts out Jenna Canal, Gray Clausen, and Jackson Hughes, who were the other three filmmakers involved. I definitely want to give them shine to like, literally everybody that gave us the time and space to tell their story. It's the ultimate gift you can give. Is vulnerability and honesty. So thank you to all those people that we met along the way.
Absolutely. Sure. Thanks for plugging that in there, man. I would have been remiss if we didn't actually get the name shouted out there. So thanks. Sweet. Well, thanks again for having the chat, and hopefully everybody will go check out On Island, and maybe we'll catch up again soon and chat about some of those future projects when they launch.